Okay.
All right.
Mics are on.
The mics are on.
No curveball.
There we go. Sorry.
Hey, it's Alex Williams, the News Tag here with Jim Zemlin, Executive Director of the Linux Foundation, and Sebastian Goazgan of Bitnami. How are you guys?
Pretty good. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. Oh, great to have you here. And, so we just we're talking to some folks from Microsoft, Stella Lynn, Senior Product Marketing Manager there, and AJ, who helped develop their app service on Linux. And I wanted to just talk a little bit about Microsoft's journey into the open source community and its impact on Linux. Was on stage with you yesterday, and they really have made a lot of work. They've done a lot of work to get to this point where their contributions show it pretty much on GitHub.
Right.
I'm curious on what is the symbolism of Microsoft for you? Becoming part of the open source community and becoming such a big part of the Linux Foundation and the Linux community.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a wonderful acknowledgement that open source is now the dominant way that applications are written. I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but I grew up with computers in the 80s, and back then, Visual Studio and the Microsoft Developer Network, you used to wait to get either at that point disks or all the CDs that you could use to develop apps. Today, developers are on GitHub, they read Hacker News, they're on Stack Overflow. Obviously, they are on the New Stack all the time, looking at the latest news from the New Stack. But they have realized that, listen, we want to be where the developers are. I think that's always been a part of Microsoft. And they want to have open source run really well on Azure, really well on their platform. And so, this just is a great acknowledgement that this is where the developers are.
So what does that mean as a partner, Sebastian? Bitnami is a partner with Microsoft, and now they have app service on Linux. But even independent of that, how does that make your company thrive a bit more, or does it change your view of the market? What is that perspective that it brings to you?
It's definitely impressive to see what Microsoft has done over a long period of time, but over the last 2-3 years in terms of open source, cloud, and then the shift to Linux. Jim mentioned it in his keynote. Linux has won, and when you see everything Microsoft is doing, on the Linux side, being extremely Linux friendly, all the there are people even coming to conferences with Linux laptops and so on. It's quite impressive. For Bitnami, definitely for us, it means that the footprint for engagement with Microsoft is even bigger, because now all the packaging of apps that we do for them, for their marketplace, things expands, right? The spectrum of things we can do with them becomes really much bigger. So it's terrific.
So what does that mean then, Jim, for the future of Linux overall? For many, many years, it's well known, historically, that there was this great tension, right, between Microsoft,
Sure.
And Windows and the Linux community. Now that now we're really past that, and we're moving into a new era. So what are those battles that you have ahead? As we kind of move more into these distributed infrastructures, for example.
Sure.
Cloud services becoming much more predominant.
Sure.
When Linux does come from, its roots are deep, that date back to the 90s.
Sure.
And so, what is that now? What does that mean for you? What does that mean for the community?
Yeah, I think one of the things about being the David to Goliath is it's a lot of fun, right? You're always the underdog. Everyone wants to root for an underdog, and for many years, Linux was this wonderful, organic, almost anti-establishment type of movement, and Microsoft made this convenient Goliath, and for real reasons, there was this huge tension, and you have to be impressed by, in particular, Satya Nadella, who has come into Microsoft, and recognize that open source is how developers want to write apps, but also recognize that the industry is moving towards a services model where, more people are getting their technology not by buying a bunch of hardware and a bunch of expensive software, but by, basically getting it as a service on things like Azure and so forth. And when you move software from the license and profit side of the ledger to the bill of materials to provide a service side, free is pretty compelling, and you have a big incentive to participate in the open source community, and Microsoft is doing that in a huge way. Hiring key kernel developers, open sourcing .NET, they're doing all of these things, acknowledging that trend. What's the big challenge for Linux and the open source community in that context? Embracing that, walking the community talk of bringing everyone to the table, including Microsoft, even though maybe the past it wasn't perfect. But then also, Linux is now a Goliath, and learning how to work in the context of being a dominant market player and learning to be even more expansive and inclusive is going to be the trick.
Sebastian, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for me, I look at it also as an open source contributor and community member. So, the Bitnami is really a David, and the Microsoft is a Goliath. So we have to keep companies like Microsoft honest in the way that they participate in the community, in the open source. So that battle, we have to say, okay, you contribute in Kubernetes and you do a lot of open source. We need to make sure that you do it for the right reasons and you do it the right way, and that you work well with the other small partners and the traditional open source contributor. I think that keeping that balance is very, very important.
Well, it makes it a lot of fun for us to cover. The technologies now are so fully available to so many people, and the communities are just, they're so numerous that just to keep up on top of things now is almost like the hardest part, right?
Yeah.
And then help people understand and explain all this seems like the hardest part. But what it seems to be doing is it seems to be ushering in a whole new generation of users, and also of technologies that are associated with new companies, that are increasingly going straight to open source because they have to, right? Those young startups, which we see, here at your show.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that trend is going to continue. We have to make sure we find ways to keep those open source projects that are really important, that you're betting your business on, that frankly Microsoft is betting their business on, are going to be sustainable, have robust distributed teams from a wide variety of stakeholders, create value that can then be reinvested back into those open source projects, and people can count on them for long periods of time. That's what we're focused on here. We think Microsoft has really stepped up to that world by contributing meaningful resources to these projects and then supporting them and providing real value through the services they offer at Microsoft.
Well, thank you both for taking some time to talk today here at the Open Source Summit. Jim, another great show. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And Sebastian, best of luck with at Bitnami and everything else.
Thank you.
And we'll see you at the next conference.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.